Okay, so I'll bring up the kind of our agenda. So can people see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. So basically the first thing, just go over the timeline a little bit for you. As you know, we released the RFP on April 13th, but we released the supportive housing materials on March 23rd early. We try and get those out as early as possible so that people can start working on that part of their application and contact you all for the stuff they need to work with you on. The applications are due again like mid-July, July 14th at noon. We'll have our supportive housing partners meeting during the feasibility phase of the review, and that'll be sometime in September. And I'll send out a meeting invite as soon as I have a date confirmed for that. And then our selection recommendations go to the Minnesota Housing Board in December. So that's kind of the overall timeline. You know, we continue to message to developers that they should contact the CoC's and the counties and tribes early in the planning process, and include the service provider when possible in those conversations to check in with you about the need, the population to be served, and the planned resources. So we had our RFP kickoff for developers a couple weeks ago, and we had 2 different days. We had one day for new or emerging developers, either new to Minnesota or just starting to do housing development. So, and then the second day was for seasoned developers that have done our application process a number of times. So, you know, we keep drumming in that message to people, and I hope it's, excuse me, I hope it's helping. But there's always the people who don't look at that stuff until later. So the first thing, you know, we're going to go over the CoC form. Make sure you all know that the county letter is no longer required, so we don't have that anymore as a form or requirement. We'll go over the Pwd narrative and process, and then the housing support commitment form. And we'll just talk about some of the basic expectations on those forms. So I'll pull up the CoC form first. So basically, this is the form that the developer, you know, completes the first section about the, you know, type of development, how many housing units, how many HPH units, and how many Pwd units, and then who the service providers are for both of those unit types, and then kind of some basic info about the units on this chart. You know, for HPH units, that's your primary interest for CoCs. How many units and by the household types. So how many units for families, singles, youth single, or youth family, the number of units by size, and then population characteristics and referral sources for each. For HPH, of course, it should be coordinated entry for referral, but they can add in other population characteristics that they might be targeting. And then any other eligibility requirements they might have, especially if they're using housing support, LTH, we want people to put that in here. And then the rental assistance sources and the number of units, and then the service funding sources, which includes funds from the operating budget. And then the same thing for Pwd units, that's units for people with disabilities. And primarily we're asking them to provide you this information, and we're asking you to provide feedback for these units, primarily if they're planning to use housing support that requires long-term homeless eligibility, because that's what most applicants have been doing. And as a lot of you know, there's a question about the ability to be able to fill all those units with that additional eligibility requirements and the number of people on your wait list for that community. And then the other supportive housing units, if they're doing other units that are not high priority homeless or units for people with disabilities, we want them to tell you about those units too, because they may use different referral sources, different resources, and it's good for you to know if they're doing 100% supportive housing about all of their units. So then the second section is the part that you complete. So basically, you know, we worked on this form last fall and early winter to get your feedback. And so we added these sections. You know, first, you're acknowledging you reviewed the proposal to determine if the units meet a need in your community, if there's a demonstrated market for the units as proposed, and the planned resources for rent assistance and services are appropriate. And then we ask you for feedback on HPH units, on the eligible population and the need and market for the units, their planned resources for rental assistance and services, feedback on the eligible population and need for units for Pwd units if they're using housing support LTH. And then for other supportive housing units. Basically, if you don't have any feedback, you can just say none, or you can just say everything looks good, or, you know, this meets a great need in our community, or whatever you want to say. And then you just, of course, they have to use coordinated entry to fill the units, and report in HMIS. And then you acknowledge if they followed your process and timelines, and then you can add any other recommendations or comments here in this section. And then you sign the form and provide it to the applicant, and they submit it to Minnesota Housing. So any questions or comments or thoughts? No? Okay. Great. Then I will open the next thing. We'll go to the county, some of the county forms. So first is the Pwd narrative. And if people are planning to apply for units for people with disabilities, really the intent of those units is to serve people with disabilities who are not homeless. They can be, but we want the county to drive that based on the people with disabilities that you're serving in your different service programs, and other initiatives you're trying to do in the county. You know, you might be trying to get folks out of adult foster care or other institutions, or, you know, have a lot of people on your caseloads for mental health that that need affordable housing. So we want the developer to contact you and discuss, the population to be served, and who will serve them, how services will be provided, referrals, all that sort of thing. So, they're expected to contact you early in the process to start planning and to work on this narrative together. They complete the top part, the basic development information. And then the county, or the tribe puts in your contact information. And then they put in the housing unit distribution, the unit types. And this is something, they should also be discussing with you. What types of units, if they should have efficiencies, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms or more, based on the population. And also discussing kind of with that, if they're planning, if they want housing support or some other source, using Minnesota supplemental aid could be a source for PWD units, depending on if that's eligible. It's a population that you're proposing is a good fit for MSA housing assistance. So then basically we want you to work with them to describe your collaboration, how you work together to create the units. And then tell us about how services will be provided. It could be by the county or tribal human services, a designated service provider that you designate, or the developer may, or a county contracted service provider. Like you might say, well, we want units for this population, and we'll have one of our contracted TCM providers provide the services. And then describe any service type and funding source. And then if the county or tribe will be the primary service provider or use a contracted service provider, we want you to describe how you work together to lease the units and address tenant issues as they come up. And then, of course, this isn't in, the ideal order. Then here is where the population would be described, the disability population here, and then the referral process, how that will work, and then how outreach will be conducted to that population. And then services, again, this part talks about how and who will provide the services and how you'll work together with property manager to provide crisis intervention and eviction prevention work. And then the tenant screening, basically all applicants have to follow our tenant selection plan guidelines, which have low barrier screening. And so they, of course, need to acknowledge that they'll follow our TSP. Well, they have to anyway, so they have to acknowledge that. And then there's some just basic information on the occupancy that they complete. And then it's signed by the owner and the county or tribal human services entity. So, questions about the PWD form? Or process? No.
Jennifer Prince has her hand raised.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just had a question. Sometimes we have developers that are coming in on the CoC side and then also identify this PWD overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you, I mean, that we need to do to kind of, I don't know, respond to any of that? I guess I know you guys have been trying to kind of separate those a little bit. But yeah, it's still coming up.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, I think we want your help and the county's help to, we've had developers, they just want to have a plan and they want to come to you with their plan and they just want you to approve it. And we really want the applicants to involve you in the process and to plan good units, because we're worried about a lot of the units that have been planned in the last couple of years. So that's why we added that information to the CoC form, so that the CoC can, push back and say, why are you doing, LTH housing support? Or we don't think we have enough people. We're going to have enough people on our list based on the units we already have, and then the proposed units going forward for high priority homeless that are also proposing LTH. And so, yeah, I think, the more I know that, Jennifer, you work with some of the counties, and some counties are more involved in CoCs than others. But really encourage dialogue between you all on planning those units and giving the developer feedback. So any other thoughts or about that?
Oh, thanks, Vicki.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. And Jennifer, I was going to use you as a great example of your wonderful coordination with sending out notices to developers and county partners about your timeline and processes, and encouraging everybody to let you know what they're doing. And so I think that's a really good practice to do that early, so that people know, and just to encourage that communication early in the process as much as possible. So I think you should share your great example with other CoCs. I know everybody has developed different processes they're using, and so I think it's been great to see that. I hope it's been helpful for you all and for the applicants. So then the next thing is just the housing support form. I think all the county and tribal human services are very familiar with the form. The developer, would request from the county housing support to use for their units. And then you complete this with them. You complete the bottom part, and put in the setting type, and the payment rates. And, we really want to know, again, if it's LTH housing support, regular housing support, or if it's some other type. And then to check the boxes, if it's LTH housing support, or if you're using banked beds, to use the supplemental service rate, or if there's a specific legislative authorization for a special service rate, which there are for a few areas, and any other comments that you have. But basically, even if a I know this happens in Hennepin and some other areas where you have an RFP, and this year it's actually later than our RFP is due, so people wouldn't be able to get commitments from the county unless they got them last year for a project. And so then sometimes a service provider will say, well, we can use some of our tenant-based contracted units. And that's fine, but we still want the county to acknowledge that that's okay for them to do. So we still want the applicant to complete this form with you. So does that make sense? Does anybody have questions about this form? No.
This is Rhonda Porter from Clay County,
Yeah.
and I just had a question. So has this form changed at all from last year's?
Nope, I think we just updated the rate,
Okay. Oh,
for-
yeah, I see it
for
there.
July.
Okay,
But otherwise it's the same form.
okay. Because we have a developer that submitted an application last year. They did not get selected, but they're going to be resubmitting again. And so I've been connected with them. And so really from the county standpoint, we've always waited to provide our housing support commitment and the persons with disability information. We've asked them to go to the continuum of care first. And so I know Carla, I see you're on the call. They'll be coming to you for that piece of it. And then in terms of the county, then these are still the only two pieces. It seems like in times past we had a third piece, but maybe
Yes.
we did. Okay.
You did, and maybe you joined us a little bit later. We had a county letter, a confirmation
Yes.
letter that we
Yes.
asked people to complete, and we eliminated that this
Yes.
year.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So these two pieces, yes. Okay.
exactly.
All right. I think that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rhonda.
Hey, Vicki, this is Joel.
Yeah.
I got a question. Your comment made me think of a situation where if the timing doesn't line up right, you shared that there could be a scenario in which the assigned service provider or the designated service provider to the development doesn't have time to apply to a county if the county is issuing an RFP for the housing support, right?
Right.
And then in that scenario, you said we'd be fine if a service provider wanted to commit their tenant-based housing support in lieu of, assignment for the site directed from the county. I was just wondering from county staff or tribal staff if there's, could you foresee a scenario or a situation in which you wouldn't want that to be done, or when they come to you for acknowledgement of that you would have hesitation? Or can we safely assume that in those situations, it would likely be certainty that you would support something like that? Just curious. I'm not sure it's ever happened, but since you said it, it got me wondering, Vicki.
Yeah, that's why we want the county to complete that form, because we usually then would ask at the partners meeting or reach out to the county, because the market's been so tight in the last few years, people haven't been able to use all their contracted authority. So most counties have been okay with that. It's not that many. It's mostly in Hennepin, because of the timing of their RFP. But do county folks have anything they want to add? I know Kate, I believe, is on the call from Hennepin. I think I saw Amy from Ramsey.
Can you, sorry, Joel, can you
Yeah.
say one more time? It was a little,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you bet.
so sometimes a county will do an RFP where the timing doesn't work for an applicant to apply for the housing support in time for our application. And so then if their provider has tenant-based, contracted units as a housing support provider, just in general, the provider will say, well, we can use 6 of our contracted units. I know Hennepin's been mostly the county doing this with their Housing First initiative that they did for many years, where they have providers they contract with to provide tenant-based housing support. And so then we want the county to acknowledge that that's okay with them. Sometimes or often the provider plans to apply the next year for the more of the site-based designation.
Yeah.
Works better.
yeah. Yeah, Ramsey County doesn't have an RFP for housing support. Would we in the future? Probably. We
Mhm.
just haven't had the staff capacity. I think our concern is that when providers come to us and they have a provider that we're not familiar with,
Mhm.
and then there's like, our capacity is that we don't have capacity to oversee all of the providers we have.
Yeah.
So then at that point, we would suggest probably a provider that we work closely with. And so it'd give us less concern.
Mhm.
One thing I will say, like opposite of Clay County, where we would want them to come to us first before housing support approvals, then get that information from the COC.
Mhm.
Because then they actually go to the COC and says, oh, we're going to have housing support in this building and I'll be in the meeting. I'm like, what? That's good to know. And then I have to email them really quickly, like, you guys don't have housing support yet. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, good point, Amy. I think that's great. I think that's what we want you to be communicating that. And that's why it's important. Every COC is different. So the more that the applicants can know that, the better. And that's why we want them to contact you early. So you can say, please use someone we're already contracting with because of our capacity. And I know there's been some people who they provided in Hennepin, but they haven't done it in Ramsey or vice versa or other counties. And so that's why we want them to talk to you as early as possible so that you can work that stuff out with them.
And Kate has her hand up. Go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I was just going to comment in Hennepin, it kind of depends on whether the developer is working with a provider who has a housing support agreement with Hennepin, or if they're applying to become a new provider. This year, we're fortunate enough to be able to take have an RFP for organizations that want to be a housing support provider and add some additional capacity. So that'll be this summer. So I should have responses back for that by the partner meeting in September. And then for those that are service providers who already have housing support agreements, if they want less than 20%, then we allow them to use their existing capacity. And if they want 20% or over, then it's going to be part of our annual January RFP. So that's how things are working in Hennepin right now.
Great, thank you, Kate.
Yeah, this is Rhonda from Clay County. I would also just add, similar to what Sarah said, we too typically, when I say we ask them to communicate with the continuum of care, what in Clay County, we go to our board for housing support agreements. So normally they connect with me, we're talking through the project, we're talking about whether we need banked beds. And then we kind of are on the same page with the development, and then we say, okay, we need to go to the continuum of care and make sure this fits in with their priorities, and then then it comes
Yes.
back to the county, then we go to the board, and so it's kind of a process, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of in line. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that makes sense, I think. It's an iterative process, which is, you know, how it should be.
Yeah, for sure.
Figure that all out for all the different pieces. So,
The housing support, that a funding commitment, where do I find that updated form that you showed there?
oh, it's on our website.
And I actually included a link in the chat a little bit ago. I'll repost it. The RFP materials can be found on our website. So I'll just
And I did post a link on the meeting invite also.
Okay, thank you.
For the housing support form too. So lots of ways to get.
Thank you.
All right. Great, thanks. So I want to make sure we covered all of this info. Oh, also, we do have Section 811 for Pwd units this year. And for those, they work with DHS to complete the Pwd narrative. It's a different narrative. So just FYI, someone might come to you with their 811 narrative and they might be confused. So send them to the county. We do have, or I mean to the state Human Services Office. We do have the contact person right on that form, so they should get the right person. But just so you all know. Yeah, and then, you know, for rents, if they don't have any type of rental assistance, then we underwrite the rents at supportive housing levels, which are basically very low rents to be affordable to the population. So it's like $100 for an efficiency, $180 for a 1-bedroom, or no, $130, sorry, and $180 for any family units. And I think I covered everything else. Yeah. Excuse me. So, plans for next year. You know, we met with a lot of you, you know, late last fall, early winter, to talk about it's gone through various iterations through the process of what we're going to do for applications next year for supportive housing units. And so we're kind of trying to accomplish two different things. One is to get a better fit for your community for proposed supportive housing units that will work and make sense and serve the needs of your population. And the other piece is we're trying to simplify the RFP. Our application, as a lot of you know, it's very cumbersome, the whole thing. I mean, the supportive housing pieces are just a small sliver of all the requirements that people have to do for an application. And so kind of been working with our QAP committee and leadership to streamline the process and also figure out better ways to get better unit fits and resource fits for homeless units and units for people with disabilities. So also, because basically 1 in 4 applications gets funded, we're trying to reduce the work people have to do because most of them will not get funded. and they're taking a lot of your time as well to talk to you about these units. And so what we're proposing for next year and the following year, it's a 2-year QAP, is to move to more of a conceptual process for high priority homeless and units for people with disabilities for developments with partial supportive housing. So that's for the developments that are proposing some units in an affordable housing development for supportive housing. For 100% supportive housing, they'll still have to complete some of the things that we just reviewed. But for those mixed use properties, basically the applicant would just send an acknowledgement notification to you guys to let you know they're applying for HPH or PWD units, just so you know. And then during our feasibility phase, instead of asking you for developers to contact you early on, we want to connect with you during the feasibility phase after we've scored and knocked out most of the applicants that will not move forward to feasibility. So there'd be a lot less applications. Then we'd want to get your feedback on the market and the resource plans for units during a feasibility phase. So our partner meeting would change to focus on this. And it would be sometime in August, September, excuse me, right after scoring. And Jennifer Prinz has been working on a methodology for the CoC's to use to kind of assess the market need, which takes in several factors. And so Jennifer, I don't know if you brought that to the CoC coordinators recently, but we're kind of holding on, of course, finalizing anything because this is still in the conceptual stage. So if there's not a market for HPH at that time, if you say that there's not a market for HPH units in this town because we already have enough units, or we just don't have people on the waiting list that want to live in X town, or we have enough capacity, we just don't need any more. Then those units, we would change them to 30% rent limit units with a priority to serve people experiencing homelessness. And then the applicant, the developer owner, would get referrals from you for those units. And, that's to be determined how that would work. But the main work to plan the units and the resources would happen post-selection. So after they're selected, then it'd be a collaborative process between the developer, the CoC, county, human services, and Minnesota Housing. And so we hope that could be more of a collaborative process between all parties, and we hope that could yield better planned units and reduce the number of people coming too early in the process with their plan already baked, even though it's not a good plan. And then for 100% supportive housing development, we're going to reduce application materials as much as possible, but we still want your feedback on your market needs and county input on their plans for units for people with disabilities. And we'd want a housing support commitment. So for the partial supportive housing, we're going to assume they're eligible for housing support. And then if they don't get it, then they'll revert to a different, to 30% units. So we would want that verification because those are a lot more units and the deal will not work unless they have rent assistance for all the units. So this kind of concept has gone through our QAP committees. It will go to our board in May for, along with the other changes we're proposing for next year. And then we'll release it for public comment in June. And there'll be several webinars and feedback sessions in June. And we'll take written comments, can be submitted anytime during the 30-day comment period. So I know there's a webinar planned for June 9th from 9 to 10:30. And there's another one on June 14th from 2 to 4. But those will be in our e-news, and I will also send, when it does go out for public comment, I'll email all of you to let you know about those sessions. But just want to open it up for your thoughts, feedback, questions. Is that too much? Does that sound crazy? Because we've been talking about it for a while, so we're getting used to it. And I know we went through several iterations when we were talking to you earlier. I know initially, we had wanted to confirm the market up front when they applied, but that's not addressing the issue of most applicants don't make it through scoring. So anyway, oh my God, I didn't realize the transcription was going this whole time. What a mess. I hate that.
I think the changes sound really good. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've done the process as a developer, and I've been involved as a COC, and if you can kind of reduce the work on the front end if you don't have a chance, and then I think having more discussion about the services and how to fund them, I think that would create less headaches for you guys and for all of us.
Yeah, we're hoping, it's a 180 flip. We spent so much time trying to get good plans, because at the beginning of all this, people just said willy-nilly, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And then so we've gradually added all these requirements, and we want to make sure there's going to be good units, and so they're all up front. And so now we're going, okay, it's still not happening. I mean, people who are doing 100% supportive housing they're planning those for years, those projects, they have to, but it's these mixed use ones that just want to get the points, basically. And so, we want the benefit of those units, but we want them to really serve the need and do it well and have the right resources. So we're hoping some of the supportive housing, strengthening supportive housing proposals in the governor's budget that we propose, and that some are in the House budget, but of course not the Senate, but we're hoping that we'll get some money to strengthen supportive housing so that we can have more resources to match at the time of selection, so that people don't have to have bad plans. That we're trying to make, this is the only resource we have, so everybody's got to fit in this square hole, that just doesn't, it's still not serving everybody. And so, and then if they don't have a good plan or can't get a good plan for whatever reason, they can still be units that can be accessed by the people who need them the most, that you guys can direct them to. So, they can just be for really poor people that are doubled up, or, you know, I mean, can go
Yep.
down the list depending on that particular community. So that's great. That's helpful feedback, because, you know, you just don't know. Are people going to freak out? I don't know what developers are going to think about this. But it's good to know that you guys think it's a good idea in general. I'm hoping it will end up in better plans. You know, we'll have to increase our capacity here just because of how work flows. But hopefully it'll be better. And so that'd be great if you can comment when we put out the plan on your thoughts, and also how you feel about the market, doing the market check-in at the feasibility point. To me, that'll be much more focused, because either there'll be the deals likely to get selected. You know, they're not all going to, but most of them will, if they make it through scoring and we have enough money. You know, we always keep some deals in as buffers, and as we move funding around, we've got this much of this and this and this and this, and we try and get as many units as possible with all the different buckets. And so then of course some developments fall out at the end, but hopefully this could yield better units and more involvement from, you know, from the community. So great.
Looks like Jennifer, go for it.
Yeah, Jennifer Prince.
I've got one more question.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, you know, with this change, do you anticipate, you know, like right now, the way you know, everything is set up, you almost have to include supportive housing, you know, to kind of get through the first gate. Is that kind of still the process? Or
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you expect a change in the number of projects that would even propose supportive housing with this.
Yep, it's
change in
still
approach.
same points,
Okay, all right.
you know, so I don't anticipate that we'd see a change in that.
Okay.
I
just didn't know if we were gonna have to go drum up business or something.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you have to worry about that.
All right.
You know, it's a difference of a point, you know, in our applications sometimes, and you get a lot of points doing supportive housing units. So and then if you have rent assistance, you get more points. So that's why people want to use housing support. And so there's a lot of points. So yeah, that's not going to matter. They'll be like, hey, but we have less to do. I like it. They won't like it when we get to selection though, and we're cracking the whip to, okay, let's hunker down and plan these units out. And no, you're not going to do it that way. No, we want to do it this way. So, I think it'll be fun. It'll be more fun. Instead of like poor Sarah Gamel is our supportive housing closer, so she has to pull her hair out with all these half-baked plans, some of them. And could we switch to housing support that's not LTH? What resource could we use for services? You know, like, can we get a better plan here? Or can use other resources, or anyway, it's a big headache. And then we cross our fingers that they're still going to work when they open.
Well, that's what to say. Maybe even pre-selection, it's like, will this plan even work? You know, don't even.
Yes, that's why that's
yeah.
Dealing with, because right now, if people meet the basic criteria, you know, they completed the forms and submitted them, we haven't been able to knock them out because we don't like their plan. And so now this would work better. Because they won't be able to close until they have a plan that works. So it, we'll get pressure to just accept some half-baked. Nope, sorry,
Right.
not doing it.
Right, and I think, yeah, you can have the county in there, the COC, and the service provider is like,
Yeah.
does everyone agree on this? Because that's what I see a lot. People like, oh, I didn't know I had to do HMIS. Oh, I didn't really need to have services.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? How did you like get this far? And you didn't
and it's
even
so
do
far
that.
in advance, and then they don't talk until they open.
Right.
And so now, Sarah, the Sarahs, that's our team. It's Vicky and the Sarahs. So, so Sarah G's been working on, we're finally trying to, the black hole of when they start planning for occupancy, then to have like a startup meeting with people before they start lease up. So they can start reaching out to you guys early, especially if there's a challenging market, because I know last year people said, well, we could probably fill those, but not all at once. So if you could stagger like filling the supportive housing units and way in advance, that could help. So we are doing that. And then Sarah Broik is our quality officer, and she works with people after they open, and she'll be checking in with people that first year, and also reaching out to you guys if there's issues or questions, stuff like that. And so we'll just be best friends for forever.
I will say, so we've had a number of like pre-lease up meetings as projects are gearing up for occupancy, and I just like continue to be shocked at like, I know we talked about this. I reviewed those forms that you completed.
Yes.
And so I'm glad that we're figuring out a solution to that, and acknowledging what kind of communication needs to change even further upstream so we don't get to that place.
Yeah, because I mean, we've got owners who don't know their unit requirements. Like, you have legal documents, or we say, well, what does the MOU say? The what? They have to do an MOU between all parties, so they know what the plan is. Okay, well, maybe you should look at that. It's supposed to update it regularly, and yeah, and service providers, they don't know, They said, hey, will you be a housing support provider for us at this place? Okay, whatever. So, they go to ICA and they're like, oh no, we don't have Minnesota housing funding. It's just housing support. It's like, no, it's capital funding. So, it's just like all these pieces, and how housing support actually works. When you start operating your property, then you find out all the hoops and hitches and, oh, what happens when this happens? So, so we are having a housing support training focused on occupancy, coming up in June, for service providers and property managers to really talk about, to have service providers and property managers really talk about, here's how it works. And here's the issues that we face sometimes. And here's what we do about it, or we don't know what to do about it. Minnesota Housing, what are we supposed to do about it? There's just all these weird funding complications from your capital funding, and if someone goes off housing support, what do you do? What kind of rent do they pay? Does their lease end? What, So we're having a training in June for that. on June 8th. So, and we do one for developers every year usually, but now we really need to get more operational. Because some people, property managers don't even know that the development team planned this until it's getting ready to open. And they're like, how's that work? How do we get, who pays the rent? I mean, what? It's always a learning experience. There's always new providers coming on board. So it's good to, so we have some really good providers that will do part of that training. So it'll be good. So any other questions or thoughts before we sign off for a Monday? No. Great. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming, and reach out if you have questions during the application process anytime. And I'll send you the QAP public comment stuff once we get it all posted. All right. Thanks so much. Bye.